Admiral Hyunwoo stood in the center of the Great Hall on Nexus Prime. The crystal walls rose high above him, catching the light from 3 different suns. Around him sat thousands of alien beings. Some looked like giant insects. Others were made of living rock. A few seemed to be pure energy floating in glass containers. They were all here to judge humanity. Hyunwoo wore his best uniform, but it felt small in this place. The hall could hold 100 human cities. The ceiling showed stars from across the galaxy. Each light represented a world that belonged to the Galactic Council. Admiral Hyunwoo of Earth, spoke a voice that sounded like breaking glass. It came from Vextar, the oldest being on the council. The creature looked like a mountain of blue crystal with eyes like diamonds. You stand here to answer for the crimes of your species. Hyunwoo kept his back straight. He had fought in 3 wars and seen planets burn. But this felt different. This felt like the end of everything humans had built among the stars. I'm ready to hear the charges, he said. A new voice spoke up. This one buzzed like a million angry bees. It belonged to Killmoth, who looked like a giant ant wearing golden armor. The charges are many, human. Your kind has brought chaos wherever they go. The alien pressed a button. Above them, pictures appeared in the air. They showed human ships fighting near a red giant star. The humans were using the star's own fire as a weapon. You turned the Rigel system into a battlefield, Killmoth buzzed. You used solar flares to destroy pirate ships. The star nearly went nova. Billions could have died. Hyunwoo watched the pictures. He remembered that fight. Pirates had been attacking trade ships. The council had been too slow to act. So humans did what they always did. They found a way to win. The pirates stopped attacking after that, Hyunwoo said. Because you almost destroyed a star, another alien shouted. This one was tall and thin like a walking tree. Normal species use weapons. You use stars. More pictures appeared. Humans racing through asteroid fields. Human miners turning space rocks into weapons. Human explorers jumping into black holes just to see what would happen. Look at this, Killmoth said, pointing at new images. Your first contact with the Zalari people. The pictures showed a human diplomat named Sujin meeting fish-like aliens in an underwater city. Everything seemed normal at first. Then the images showed Sujin challenging the Zalari king to a drinking contest. The contest lasted 3 days. By the end, both the human and the alien were best friends. She got the king so drunk he signed a trade deal that gave humans access to 3 star systems, Killmoth complained. That is not how diplomacy works. But it worked, Hyunwoo said with a small smile. That is the problem. Vextar's crystal body flashed with anger. Nothing your species does makes sense. You solve problems by creating bigger problems. You make peace by starting wars. You explore space by breaking every safety rule ever written. An alien that looked like a floating jellyfish spoke next. Its voice was soft like wind through leaves. Tell us about the incident at Kepler Station. Hyunwoo's smile faded. That had been a bad day. Human engineers led by a young man named Tae-ho had been fixing the station's power core. Something went wrong. The core was going to explode and kill everyone on the station. The council ships were too far away to help. The humans had minutes to act, so Tae-ho did something that should have been impossible. He jury-rigged a mining laser to the station's communications array. Then he used the laser to cut the station in half. Half the station, with most of the people, drifted away from the exploding core. The other half was destroyed. Your engineer saved 8,000 lives, the jellyfish alien said. But he did it by destroying a station worth more than most planets. Would you rather have a dead station with dead people? Hyunwoo asked. We would rather have humans who think before they act. The argument went on for hours. The aliens showed more evidence. Humans starting bar fights that turned into trade negotiations. Human scientists testing weapons on their own ships. Human captains using coin flips to make battle plans. Each story made the aliens more angry. To them, humans were dangerous children, playing with fire in a house made of wood. Finally, Vextar called for quiet. We have seen enough. Admiral Hyunwoo, Your species has been in space for only 200 years. In that time, you have caused more chaos than some species cause in 10,000 years. You call it chaos, Hyunwoo said. We call it getting things done. Getting things done? Killmoth's buzz rose to a shriek. You got things done when you turned a peaceful mining operation into a space battle. You got things done when you taught the Andronian children to play poker. You got things done when you convinced 3 different species to have a cooking contest that nearly started a war. But did it start a war? Hyunwoo asked. That is not the point. I think it is exactly the point. Vextar raised a crystal hand for silence. The Council has made its decision. We cannot let humanity continue to spread chaos across the galaxy. The vote was 847 to 3. We invoked the binding protocol. Hyunwoo felt his heart sink. The binding protocol was the Council's ultimate punishment. It meant humanity would be trapped in their home system forever. Energy dampeners are being placed around your sun as we speak. Vextar continued. No human ship will be able to leave the Sol system. No human will be able to contact other worlds. Earth will be isolated until your species learns to behave properly. And how long will that take? Hyunwoo asked. Perhaps 1,000 years, perhaps 10,000. When humanity proves it can follow rules and respect order, we will consider removing the barriers. Hyunwoo looked around the Great Hall. He saw aliens who were afraid. They feared what humans might do next. They feared the chaos that followed humanity wherever it went. But Hyunwoo also saw something else. He saw aliens who had lived so long. They had forgotten how to take risks. They had rules for everything. They had procedures for every situation. They had become so careful that they had stopped growing. I want to say something, Hyunwoo said. You have no more rights here, human. Just listen for a minute. Hyunwoo's voice was calm but hard. You think you're protecting the galaxy from us. You think we're too dangerous, too wild, too unpredictable. He looked at each alien face he could see. But what happens when something comes that you can't handle with your rules and your procedures? What happens when you face something that doesn't care about your careful plans? What are you talking about? Killmoth demanded. I'm talking about the unknown, Hyunwoo said. The things hiding in dark space that you've never seen. The threats that are older than your oldest civilizations. What happens when order and rules aren't enough? Vextar's crystal body pulsed with dismissive light. You speak like a child. Telling ghost stories. Maybe I do, Hyunwoo admitted. But children believe in monsters for a reason. Sometimes monsters are real. The Admiral was led away as the dampeners around Earth's sun came online. Behind him, the aliens celebrated their victory over chaos. They returned to their ordered lives, satisfied that the galaxy was safe. None of them noticed the small, worried look in Vextar's ancient eyes. Deep in the crystal being's memory was a fragment of something old. Something about darkness between stars and the last war that drove terrors into the void. But that was just ancient history. What could it matter, now? Above them, the stars continued to shine, ignorant of the shadows gathering beyond the galaxy's edge. 3 years passed since the energy dampeners trapped humanity in their home system. The galaxy had never been more peaceful. Trade routes flowed smoothly between worlds. Conflicts were solved through proper talks and signed papers. The Galactic Council met every month to discuss small problems and make careful plans. On Earth, Dr. Soo-jin sat in her small laboratory looking at screens full of numbers. She used to study alien life forms on distant worlds. Now she could only study radio signals from space. The dampeners around the sun blocked all travel, but they could not stop her from listening. She had been tracking strange signals for weeks. They came from beyond the galaxy's edge, where no one lived and nothing was supposed to exist. The signals were wrong in ways that hurt her head to think about. They moved faster than light but also seemed to arrive before they were sent. They carried energy patterns that should not be possible. Soo-jin rubbed her tired eyes and checked her equipment again. Every test said the same thing. Something was out there, and it was getting closer. On Nexus Prime, the Council was holding another routine meeting. Representatives from 1,000 worlds sat in the Crystal Hall discussing trade agreements and shipping schedules. Everything was orderly and calm. Elder Vextar listened to reports about grain shipments and mining quotas. This was how things should be. No human chaos, no unexpected problems, no wild plans that made no sense but somehow worked. A message arrived for Minho, the former human ambassador who still lived on Nexus Prime. The Council had allowed him to stay as a symbol of peace between species. He spent his days in the Great Library, reading about galactic history. The message was from Sujin on Earth. It contained numbers and charts that made Minho frown. He looked at the data 3 times before understanding what it meant. The numbers showed empty space where stars used to be. Minho ran through the crystal corridors to reach the council hall. Guards tried to stop him, but he pushed past them. He burst into the meeting just as a trade representative was explaining new rules for cargo inspections. "Something's wrong," Minho shouted. "The outer rim is going dark." The aliens looked at him with annoyance. Killmoth's golden armor clicked as she moved. "Human, you have no right to speak here. The binding protocol removed your voice from this. Council, listen to me." Minho held up his datapad. "Entire star systems are disappearing." "Impossible," said Vextar. "Stars do not simply vanish. Look at the data." Minho threw his pad onto the central display table. The device projected images into the air above the assembled aliens. Star maps showed the galaxy's outer edge. Red markers indicated where monitoring stations used to report from. Over the past 6 months, 43 monitoring stations had gone quiet. The stations were spread across thousands of light years, but they all stopped sending signals within days of each other. "Equipment failure," suggested the jellyfish alien. "Those stations are old." "All of them at once?" Minho asked. "Coincidence." "Then explain this." Minho changed the display to show deep space scans. Where bright stars used to shine, there was only darkness. Not the normal darkness of empty space, but something deeper. Something that seemed to eat light itself. The council chamber grew quiet. Even the most dismissive aliens stared at the impossible images. "Send a survey fleet," Minho said. "1 ship just to check." Vextar considered the request. "Very well, but this is likely nothing more than sensor errors and human paranoia." The survey ship Brightwing left Nexus Prime the next day. It carried a crew of 12 aliens from different species. Their mission was simple: fly to the outer rim, check the missing monitoring stations, and report back. The Brightwing never returned. Its last message arrived 3 days after it should have reached the outer rim. The transmission was broken and full of static. Only a few words came through clearly. "They're not gone. They're eaten. Devourers in the dark." Then silence. The council called an emergency meeting. This time, they listened when Minho spoke. "Send a full fleet," he urged. "Whatever's out there destroyed the Bright Wing. It's consuming whole star systems." "You exaggerate," Killmoth buzzed, but her voice lacked its usual confidence. "1 ship proves nothing." Vextar made the decision. "We will send the 7th Fleet, 200 ships with our best weapons and crews. They will investigate these anomalies." The 7th Fleet was the pride of the Council military. It included battleships from 50 different worlds. Each ship carried weapons that could crack planets and shields that could withstand supernovas. If something was hiding in the dark, they would find it and destroy it. Admiral Keltar of the Rock People commanded the fleet. He was ancient even by Council standards and had fought in wars that humans could not pronounce. Nothing in the galaxy scared him. The fleet jumped to faster than light speed and headed for the outer rim. On Earth, Sujin detected their passage through her instruments. She also detected something else. The strange signals from beyond the galaxy had changed. They were stronger now, and they seemed to be responding to the approaching fleet. Sujin sent urgent messages to Minho, warning him that something was wrong, but the messages would take hours to reach Nexus Prime through the Council's slow communication systems. The 7th Fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of known space. What they found there defied understanding. Whole solar systems had been torn apart. Planets were gone, leaving only scattered atoms floating in empty space. Stars had been drained of their fire and collapsed into dark husks. The very fabric of space seemed to be unraveling. Admiral Keltar ordered his ships to spread out and scan for survivors. They found nothing. No debris, no bodies, no trace that billions of living beings had ever existed here. Then the Devourers appeared. They came from nowhere and everywhere at once. They were not ships or creatures or anything that had names. They were holes in reality itself, spaces where existence simply stopped. Looking at them hurt the mind and made strong warriors weep. The fleet opened fire with every weapon they had. Energy beams, missiles, particle cannons, and gravity bombs all struck the approaching darkness. Nothing happened. The weapons passed through the Devourers like light through smoke. Worse, each attack seemed to make the dark things stronger. They grew larger and moved faster, consuming the energy meant to destroy them. Admiral Keltar tried to retreat, but it was too late. The Devourers surrounded his fleet like a closing net. Ships began to disappear, not destroyed but simply erased from existence. Their atoms were unraveled and their energy absorbed by the hungry darkness. The Admiral's final message reached Nexus Prime just as Sujin's warning arrived. They adapt to everything. Every weapon feeds them. Every defense makes them stronger. They learn from what they consume. By all the gods of all worlds, they're not attacking us, they're studying us. Then the 7th Fleet was gone. 200 ships and 50,000 of the galaxy's finest warriors simply stopped existing. The council chamber erupted in panic. Aliens who had lived for thousands of years screamed like children. Species that had never known fear began to understand terror. Vextar's crystal body pulsed with desperate light. Send word to all worlds. Evacuate the outer rim. Pull back all forces. To where? Minho asked quietly. If they can consume entire fleets, where can we run? That question hung in the air like a poison cloud. For the first time in their long history, the Council had no answer. Meanwhile, deep in the Council's most secure archives, ancient computers began to wake up. Files that had been sealed for millions of years started to unlock themselves. Warnings written in dead languages flickered across forgotten screens. The old records spoke of a time before the Council, before civilization, before peace. They told of a war so terrible that entire dimensions had been sacrificed to win it. They spoke of enemies that consumed reality itself and could only be fought with weapons that made no sense. They spoke of chaos as the only shield against the dark. But the records were old and fragmented. Most had been lost when their creators chose to forget the horrors they had defeated. Only scattered pieces remained, written in codes that few could read. In his cell on Earth, Admiral Hyunwoo stood by his small window and looked up at the stars. He could not see the Devourers with his naked eyes, but he could feel them. They were coming, bringing darkness that would swallow everything in its path. The humans had been bound to protect the galaxy from their chaos. Now Hyunwoo wondered who would protect the galaxy from the things that chaos was meant to fight. The ancient archives deep beneath Nexus Prime had not been opened in 3 million years. Dust-covered machines that were old when the first council members learned to speak. Now these forgotten computers hummed to life as emergency protocols. Activated Boram was a human archaeologist who had been studying on Nexus Prime when the binding protocol trapped her people. Unlike other humans who returned to Earth, she had been given special permission to stay and study alien history. The council thought one human researcher was harmless enough. They were about to learn how wrong they could be. Boram found herself pulled into the emergency research team after the 7th Fleet disappeared. While other aliens panicked, she dove into the oldest records with excitement. This was the kind of mystery she lived for. "Look at this," she said, pointing at symbols on a screen that hurt to look at directly. "These writings are older than any known civilization. They talk about something called the hunger between stars." Elder Vextar studied the ancient text through filters that made it safer to read. The crystal being's light dimmed as understanding dawned. "I remember fragments," Vextar whispered. Stories told by my creators before they passed into crystal sleep. They spoke of a war that ended everything. More records surfaced as the computers worked through millions of years of sealed data. The picture they painted was terrifying. Long ago, when the galaxy was young, a different kind of life had existed. These beings were made of living space itself, feeding on the energy of stars and the matter of worlds. They had built an empire that spanned not just galaxies, but entire dimensions. They called themselves many names, but the records most often used one word: devourers. The devourers had consumed reality after reality, growing stronger with each meal. They adapted to any weapon, learned from any defense, and turned every victory against them into greater power for themselves. A coalition of ancient species had fought against them for eons. The war had raged across space and time itself. Entire universes were destroyed in battles that lasted millions of years. Finally, the ancient coalition found a way to win. But the cost was everything. They used chaos, Boram said, reading from a record that flickered in and out of existence. Pure, random chaos that the devourers could not predict or adapt to. The weapon had worked, but it destroyed the wielders along with their enemies. The devourers were banished to the spaces between realities, trapped in a prison of impossible mathematics. The ancient coalition died out, their civilizations burned away by the chaotic forces they had unleashed. The survivors buried all records of the war and vowed never to speak of it again. They built the early council on principles of order and predictability, believing that chaos was too dangerous to ever use again. But they're back, Minho said, looking at the data from the outer rim. More systems went dark every day. And we don't have the weapons that stopped them before. We do, said a new voice. Everyone turned to see an alien none of them recognized. It was tall and thin, with skin like starlight and eyes that held the depth of space. It moved slowly, as if each step caused great pain. I am Elder Kanon, the being said in a voice like wind through dead worlds. I am the last of the Watchers. My people were tasked with guarding the seals that held the Devourers in their prison. Vextar's crystal form blazed with recognition. The Watchers were legend. My creators spoke of you as myths. We were real enough, Kanon replied sadly. For 3 million years we maintained the barriers that kept the hunger at bay. But the seals have been weakening. We lost the last Watcher station 6 months ago. That is when the Devourers broke free. The alien looked around the room with ancient tired eyes. The weapons that defeated them still exist, scattered across the galaxy. But they require something that your ordered civilization has forgotten how to use. What? Boram asked. Chaos. Pure, unpredictable, reality-bending chaos. As if summoned. By those words, alarms began blaring throughout Nexus Prime. The Devourers had broken through another defense line. 3 more star systems had gone dark in the past hour. The darkness was spreading faster now, accelerating as it consumed more matter and energy. Council fleets tried to slow the advance, but every battle only fed the enemy. The Devourers learned from each encounter, adapting their approach and growing stronger. Traditional tactics were useless against an enemy that could predict and counter any logical strategy. On Earth, Admiral Hyunwoo received reports through secret channels that still worked despite the dampeners. He sat in his small quarters, reading about the destruction of fleets and the fall of civilizations. Sujin worked frantically in her lab, trying to find patterns in the chaos. But the more she studied the Devourers, the more she understood why. They were winning. They're perfect, she told Taeho during one of their encrypted conversations. They adapt to everything. Every attack teaches them something new. Every defense gives them a new way to break through. Taeho was studying the reports from his engineering perspective. It's like fighting a computer that learns from every mistake. Except this computer can rewrite the laws of physics. How do you fight something like that? You don't fight it with logic, Hyunwoo said, joining their conversation. You fight it with something it can't understand. Back on Nexus Prime, the council was falling apart. Representatives fled to their home worlds trying to save their people. Others demanded impossible solutions or blamed each other for the disaster. Elder Kanon shared more secrets from the ancient war. The old weapons are hidden in places where chaos naturally occurs, nebulae where space itself is unstable, binary, pulsars that twist time into knots, black holes that sing songs of madness. How do we reach these weapons? Minho asked. You don't, the Watcher replied. Only beings capable of true chaos can safely approach them. Your ordered minds would be destroyed by the proximity to such randomness. The implication hung heavy in the air. The galaxy's most orderly species needed chaos to survive, but their nature prevented them from wielding it. What about the humans? Boram suggested quietly. The suggestion hit the chamber like a physical blow. Kilmoth's buzz rose to a shriek of anger. The humans? The same species we bound because they were too chaotic? Yes, Boram said firmly. Think about it. They make no sense. Their plans are random. They solve problems by creating bigger problems. They're exactly what we need. Never. Kilmoth slammed an armored fist on the table. We will not unleash human chaos on the galaxy. The galaxy is already ending, Minho pointed out. What's left to protect? The debate raged for hours while more systems died. Some council members insisted that Order could still win if they just tried harder. Others suggested fleeing to distant galaxies and starting over, but the Devourers were spreading too fast. Soon there would be nowhere left to run. Elder Vextar made the decision that would change everything. Send a message to Earth, the crystal being commanded. Tell Admiral Hyunwoo that the binding protocol is suspended. Tell him we need human chaos to save us all. You cannot be serious, Kilmoth protested. I am deadly serious. The humans warned us this day would come. They said we would face something our rules couldn't handle. They were right. The message was sent through quantum channels that bypassed the dampeners around Earth's sun. It reached Hyunwoo within minutes. The Admiral read the desperate plea from the Council, asking for humanity's help against an enemy that fed on order and logic. He looked out his window at the stars that humans could no longer reach. Then he smiled. Sujin, he called on the communication system. Gather every human who still remembers how to think sideways. Tell them it's time to show the galaxy what real chaos looks like. What about the dampeners? Taeho asked. The Council is about to remove them, Hyunwoo replied. And when they do, we're going to give them exactly what they asked for. Pure, concentrated, impossible human chaos. In the depths of space, the Devourers sensed the change. For the first time since breaking free, they encountered something they could not immediately understand. Patterns that made no sense. Energy signatures that violated every law they had learned. The ancient enemy paused in their consumption, trying to analyze this new development. They had no idea that humanity was about to teach them the true meaning of unpredictability. The energy dampeners around Earth's sun shut down with a sound like breaking glass. For the first time in 3 years, humans could travel to the stars again. But what emerged from the Sol system was unlike any fleet the galaxy had ever seen. Admiral Hyunwoo led the first wave in a ship that looked like it had been built by children with spare parts. The hull was covered in random colors and patterns that hurt alien eyes to look at. The weapons pointed in different directions, and some appeared to be made from mining equipment and kitchen appliances. Behind him came more ships that made even less sense, cargo vessels painted with swirling designs. Passenger liners fitted with weapons that should not work. Racing ships jury-rigged with scientific equipment. Each craft was different, as if no two humans could agree on how a proper spaceship should look. Sujin commanded a science vessel that broadcast music from 17 different planets at the same time. The songs had no pattern, no rhythm that alien minds could follow. The sound seemed to bend space around the ship in impossible ways. Taeho flew an engineering ship that rebuilt itself as it traveled. Parts of the hull shifted and changed every few minutes. Weapons appeared and disappeared randomly. The ship's computer played games with itself to make important decisions. The human fleet moved through space in ways that violated every principle of naval tactics. Ships broke formation for no reason, then regrouped in patterns that made no sense. Some vessels flew backwards while shooting forwards. Others spun in circles while their crews sang birthday songs in ancient languages. council observers watching. From safe distances reported that looking at the human fleet too long caused headaches and confusion. Several alien commanders requested transfers rather than try to understand human battle plans. But the chaos worked when the humans encountered their first group of devourers near the Vega system. Something unprecedented happened. The ancient enemies who had adapted to every weapon and strategy for millions of years simply stopped. For the first time since breaking free from their prison, the devourers could not understand what they were facing. Human ships attacked in patterns that had no logic. Captain Wu Jin led his Marines in boarding actions where they defeated dark entities by performing interpretive dance. The movements were so random and meaningless that the devourers could not adapt to them. Jinne, a pilot who had been racing ships before the war, navigated through space-time anomalies by following her gut feelings. She flew through dimensions that should not exist, taking shortcuts that violated physics. Her route made no sense, but it got her to the ancient weapon caches that Elder Kanon had described. The weapons themselves were things of chaos. One looked like a flower that sang backwards. Another appeared to be a box that was bigger inside than outside. A third seemed to be made of crystallized laughter. Human crews grabbed these impossible weapons and used them in ways their creators never intended. They turned reality-bending tools into can openers, used dimension-warping devices as communication equipment, and converted chaos generators into coffee makers. It should not have worked. By all the laws of physics and logic, the human approach should have failed catastrophically. Instead, it was devastating to the devourers. The ancient enemies had evolved to predict and counter any rational strategy. They could adapt to weapons that made sense and defenses that followed rules. But they could not adapt to attacks that had no purpose, weapons that contradicted themselves, and tactics that changed randomly from moment to moment. Boram, now serving as a human-alien liaison, watched the battles from a council monitoring station. She tried to explain what she was seeing to the assembled alien commanders. "The humans aren't trying to win," she said, pointing at displays showing the chaotic combat. "They're trying to be as unpredictable as possible. Every move is designed to make no sense." "But they are winning," Vextar observed. For the first time since the Devourers returned, enemy forces were actually retreating. "That's the point," Boram replied. "The Devourers expect their enemies to try to win. They can predict victory-seeking behavior, but they can't predict behavior that seeks chaos for its own sake." The human fleet spread across the galaxy, taking impossible risks and achieving impossible victories. They used techniques that should have killed them all. Ships flew into black holes and came out stronger. Crews breathed vacuum and laughed about it. Weapons malfunctioned in exactly the right ways. But the price was terrible. Human minds were not meant to embrace pure chaos. The closer they came to true randomness, the more they lost themselves. Some crews forgot their own names but remembered exactly how to confuse reality-eating monsters. Others spoke only in mathematical equations that solved themselves backwards. So Young, a quantum physicist who volunteered for the most dangerous missions, spent 3 days existing in 17 different dimensions simultaneously. She saved an entire star cluster by being in multiple places at once, but when she returned, she could only communicate through origami flowers. Wu Jin led increasingly bizarre boarding actions. His Marines defeated Devourers by playing children's games, telling jokes in dead languages, and performing magic tricks that actually worked. Each victory cost them more of their sanity, but they kept fighting because someone had to. The Devourers began to change their tactics. For the first time in eons, they tried to retreat from battles they could not understand. But retreat required logical thinking, and logic was exactly what made them vulnerable to chaos. Human ships followed the fleeing enemies, not because they had a plan, but because following seemed like a fun thing to do. They chased Devourers through dimensions that had no names, fought battles in places where time ran backwards, and won victories that had already happened tomorrow. The ancient weapon caches revealed more secrets as humans experimented with them. Some weapons could only be fired by people who were genuinely confused. Others required the user to believe in impossible things. A few worked best when broken. Tejo discovered that the most powerful chaos weapons responded to human emotion. rather than human logic. He learned to make reality-warping tools work by getting angry at them, being sad about them, or telling them jokes until they laughed. The human fleet grew stranger with each battle. Ships began to exist in multiple realities at once. Crews developed the ability to see around corners and backwards through time. Some vessels became so chaotic that they ceased to be physical objects and became pure possibility. Council forces watching from a distance could barely recognize humanity anymore. The beings who had once been their greatest worry had transformed into something beyond understanding. They fought with weapons made of crystallized madness and defended themselves with shields of pure confusion, but they were winning. System after system was liberated from the devourers. The ancient enemies, faced with an opponent they could not adapt to, began to make mistakes for the first time in their existence. They tried to learn from chaos and drove themselves into feedback loops that tore them apart. Elder Kanon, watching from Nexus Prime, recognized what was happening. The humans are not just using chaos as a weapon, the ancient watcher explained. They are becoming chaos itself. They are transforming into living embodiments of unpredictability. Is that good or bad? Minho asked. I do not know, Kanon admitted. My people never dared go so far. We used controlled chaos, measured randomness. The humans have abandoned all limits. As the human fleet pushed deeper into devourer-held space, reports became increasingly impossible to understand. Ships existed and did not exist simultaneously. Battles were fought with weapons made of pure irony. Victories were achieved by losing so badly that reality felt sorry for them and changed the rules. The final push toward the galactic core was about to begin. That was where the Devourers had gathered their greatest strength, where they were making their last stand against the chaos that humanity had unleashed. But by now, the question was not whether humanity could defeat the ancient enemy. The question was whether anything recognizably human would survive the victory. The galactic core blazed with unnatural light as the final battle began. Here, near the great black hole at the center of everything, the Devourers had gathered their remaining strength. They had consumed thousands of star systems and grown beyond counting. Their darkness stretched across space like a living shadow that ate light itself. Against them came the human fleet, if it could still be called that. The ships barely looked like ships anymore. Some existed only on Tuesdays. Others had convinced themselves they were actually flowers and bloomed in the vacuum of space. A few had gotten so confused about what they were supposed to be that they became pure concepts floating through reality. Admiral Hyunwoo stood on the bridge of his flagship, though standing was relative when gravity had decided to flow sideways. His crew had long ago forgotten their names, but they remembered how to make impossible things happen by believing in them very hard. Status report, Hyunwoo called out. We exist, sir, replied his communications officer, who was currently a rainbow. Sometimes. Good enough. What about the enemy? They're very angry about not understanding us, reported the tactical officer, who had become unstuck in time and was experiencing the battle from 17 different moments at once. I think we hurt their feelings. Around them, the space near, the galactic core had become a battlefield where the laws of physics went to die. Devourers attacked with weapons of pure entropy, while humans defended themselves with shields made of crystallized confusion. Stars were born and died in minutes as reality struggled to understand what was happening. So Young, the quantum physicist who now existed in multiple dimensions, had developed a plan to end the war. It was a terrible plan that would cost everything, but it was the only way to stop the Devourers permanently. She appeared on every human ship at once, her message reaching through twisted space to confused minds. We need to destabilize reality itself, her voice said from everywhere and nowhere. Make existence so chaotic that the Devourers cannot consume it. The plan was simple in the way that infinity is simple. Every human ship would simultaneously do something completely random and impossible. The combined chaos would create a paradox so profound that it would trap the Devourers in a loop of endless confusion. But to generate that much chaos, the humans would have to abandon the last threads of their sanity and humanity. They would become pure randomness, living embodiments of impossibility. They would save the galaxy by ceasing to exist as anything recognizable. All ships, Hyunwoo announced, prepare for maximum chaos. This is what we came here to do. Across the fleet, human crews began their final transformations. Taeho's engineering ship started building itself backwards while moving forward through time. Sujin's science vessel began studying the question of why questions exist. Woojin's marines practiced the ancient art of fighting their own shadows and winning. The Devourers sensed the change and pressed their attack. Waves of darkness swept toward the human fleet, but the closer they came to the ships, the more confused they became. How do you consume something that insists it is both there and not there? How do you adapt to weapons that change what they are while you're being hit by them? Jin Ai, the pilot who navigated by gut feeling, found herself at the center of the chaos. Her ship had become so random that it existed in all possible states simultaneously. She was flying every course at once, fighting every battle that could ever happen. Now, So Young shouted across dimensions. Every human ship did something completely different at exactly the same moment. Some shot at their own allies while declaring their love for the enemy. Others played musical instruments that had never been invented. A few decided to become poetry and started rhyming with themselves. The combined impossibility of their actions broke something fundamental in the structure of reality. Space-time hiccuped. The Devourers, faced with infinite unpredictable possibilities, happening simultaneously, tried to adapt to everything at once. Their consciousness, evolved over millions of years to learn and counter any threat, locked up like a computer asked to divide by zero. They began consuming themselves. Ancient entities that had devoured galaxies found themselves trapped in loops, where they were both predator and prey, hunter and hunted, consumer and consumed. They could not break free because breaking free required logical thinking, and logic no longer applied to the space around them. The feedback loop spread through their ranks like a virus of impossibility. Devourers turned on each other, not out of madness but out of the simple inability to tell the difference between self and other, when chaos had made all categories meaningless. Within hours, the ancient enemy began retreating into the spaces between realities. But this time, the retreat was not strategic. It was desperate flight from a battlefield where existence itself had become too random for them to understand. The humans watched them go, though watching was difficult when some of the observers had temporarily become the color purple. "Did we win?" asked a voice from everywhere. "I think so," replied another voice from nowhere, "unless we lost so badly that we won," which might be the same thing. As the Devourers vanished into dimensional exile, reality began to slowly repair itself. The paradoxes faded, though they left scars that would puzzle scientists for generations. Space-time resumed its normal flow more or less, but the cost became clear as the chaos settled. Most of the human fleet no longer existed in any recognizable form. Ships had become abstract concepts. Crews had transformed into living questions. Some had chosen to remain scattered across probability space, existing as pure possibility. Those who retained enough coherence to be called human faced a difficult choice. They could return to normal existence, but they would always carry the chaos within them. They had touched the fundamental randomness that underlay reality, and it had changed them forever. Admiral Hyun-woo found himself on Nexus Prime, though he could not remember how he had gotten there. The council chamber looked the same, but everything felt different when viewed through eyes that had seen behind the curtain of existence. Elder Vextar's crystal form pulsed with gratitude and fear. "You saved us all," the ancient being said. "But at what cost?" "The cost we always knew we'd pay," Hyunwoo replied. His voice sounded normal, but words of impossible colors sometimes slipped out between sentences. "We became what the galaxy needed us to be." Boram had survived with most of her sanity intact, though she now occasionally spoke in mathematics that solved itself. She helped explain the situation to the confused council. "The Devourers are gone," she said, "trapped in paradox loops where they'll spend eternity trying to adapt to their own confusion. They can't escape because escape requires logical thought, and logic is exactly what the chaos prevents." And the humans? Killmoth asked quietly. We're still here, Hyunwoo answered. But we're also there, and everywhere and sometimes nowhere. We exist in the spaces between certainty. Minho, who had remained on Nexus Prime throughout the war, helped arrange the aftermath. The galaxy was saved, but it needed new rules for a universe where some beings now existed partially outside normal reality. The Council offered to remove all restrictions on humanity, to give them full membership and equal status. But many humans chose differently. So Young, speaking from 17 dimensions at once, explained their decision. We've become guardians of the impossible. We'll watch the edges of reality, where chaos touches order. If something like the Devourers ever returns, we'll be ready. Taeho established workshops in Twisted Space where impossible things were built and maintained. Sujin founded research stations that studied questions that answered themselves. Woojin led patrols through dimensions that existed only on alternate Thursdays. Some humans did return to normal life, carrying their chaos quietly within them. They became diplomats who could negotiate with living concepts, engineers who built bridges across probability gaps, and explorers who mapped territories that existed only in potential. The galaxy found a new balance. The Council maintained order and civilization while humanity patrolled the chaotic edges where sanity went to die. Both were necessary, both were valued. Years passed. The Devourers remained trapped in their paradox prison, driven mad by their own inability to understand the chaos that surrounded them. Sometimes they tried to escape, but each attempt only deepened their confusion. Admiral Hyunwoo, now existing partially in normal space and partially in the realm of pure possibility, often stood watch at the edge of known reality. He could see, through the barriers between dimensions, monitoring threats that had not yet learned to exist. The Council had once feared human chaos because they thought it would destroy everything. They had been right, in a way. Human chaos had destroyed the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known. It had destroyed the tyranny of absolute order and created space for impossible things to flourish. Standing at the intersection of order and chaos, Hyunwoo smiled with lips that sometimes existed. You wanted us bound because you feared what we might do, he said to the stars. But chaos isn't destruction. It's infinite possibility. And sometimes, that's exactly what the universe needs. Behind him, reality continued its ancient dance between order and chaos, now protected by beings who had chosen to become the guardians of impossibility itself. The galaxy was safe.